In the forgotten corners of the northern range, where winter reigns 9 months of the year and silence is a constant companion, Lyra had carved her solitude from ice and determination. 5 winters she had survived alone, an omega without a pack, her scarred back bearing witness to why isolation was preferable to submission. The forest knew her footsteps. The wolves and deer acknowledged her territory. She had built walls of both wood and will, keeping the world at bay while a small fire burned stubbornly in her hearth. They said an omega couldn't survive without a pack. They said the loneliness would kill her before the cold. They were wrong. But on the night when snow fell like shattered dreams, and wind howled with voices from her past, a scent she never expected to encounter again drifted through the cracks of her carefully constructed sanctuary. Alpha, not the one who had broken her body, but one whose amber eyes would soon challenge everything she believed about strength and survival. Her wolf, dormant for so long, stirred beneath her skin with a forgotten hunger. The fire in her hearth was not the only flame that had refused to die. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. Lyra's breath plumed in the frigid air as she knelt before the dying fire. Her fingers, calloused and chapped from years of survival, worked methodically to coax the embers back to life. Outside her small cabin, the wind howled through the pines, a familiar lullaby that had kept her company for the past 5 winters. "Come on," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. The spark caught, flames licking tentatively at the kindling. Relief washed over her as warmth slowly returned to the single-room dwelling. 5 years, 5 winters alone in these woods, and this one promised to be the harshest yet. The snow had started falling earlier than usual, blanketing the forest in white before the autumn leaves had fully turned. Game was already scarce, forcing her to venture farther from the safety of her cabin. Lyra rose to her feet, wincing at the ache in her joints. At 26, she felt decades older, her body worn down by solitude and survival. She moved to the window, brushing aside the threadbare curtain to peer at the darkening sky. Another storm was brewing, the clouds heavy with snow. She'd need to gather more firewood before it hit. Pulling on her worn fur coat, patched and repatched over the years, she steeled herself for the biting cold. The moment she stepped outside, the wind clawed at her face, seeking entry through any exposed skin. Lyra tugged her woolen scarf higher, covering her nose and mouth. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, uncomfortable with the bitter cold, but resigned to it. Once, her inner wolf had been strong, vibrant. Now, it was a subdued presence, weakened by isolation and the absence of pack bonds. That was the price of being an omega without a pack, the slow, inexorable fading of her wolf's spirit. Lyra trudged through knee-deep snow toward the woodpile at the edge of the clearing. 5 years ago, when she'd first fled into these woods, building the cabin had nearly killed her. She'd had no experience with construction, no tools except those she'd stolen in her escape, but desperation had made her resourceful. Now, the small structure stood as a testament to her will to survive. She gathered an armful of logs, her movements practiced and efficient. The wind picked up, driving icy particles against her skin like tiny needles. Lyra turned back toward the cabin, her eyes narrowing against the assault. That's when she caught it, a scent that didn't belong. Her nostrils flared, wolf senses heightening despite years of suppression. Someone, had passed through her territory. Recently. Lyra froze, heart hammering against her ribs. No one came to this part of the forest. It was too remote, too dangerous for humans, and no wolf pack had claimed these lands for generations. That was why she'd chosen it. She scanned the tree line, searching for movement. Nothing but the swaying of pine boughs heavy with snow, but the scent remained, unmistakable now that she'd noticed it. Wolf, male, alpha. The logs tumbled from her arms as panic seized her. An alpha in her territory could mean only one thing. They'd found her. After all these years, they'd tracked her down. Lyra bolted for her cabin, abandoning the firewood. Inside, she slammed the door shut, securing the 3 heavy locks she'd installed. Her breathing came in shallow gasps as she pressed her back against the rough-hewn wood. "Think," she commanded herself, forcing her mind past the fear. The scent had been fresh, but not immediate. Hours old, perhaps. She still had time. Moving quickly, Lyra grabbed her emergency pack, always ready, always stocked. 5 years of vigilance had prepared her for this moment. She'd need to leave before the storm hit, find somewhere else to hide, somewhere farther, more isolated, if such a place even existed. As she shoved a few precious belongings into the pack, a memory surfaced, the Alpha she'd fled from all those years ago. Marcus. His face still haunted her dreams, those cold eyes watching as he'd ordered her punishment, for the crime of questioning him, for the sin of being an Omega who didn't know her place. The scars on her back tingled at the memory, a phantom pain that never truly faded. 20 lashes in front of the entire pack. And after, when she'd been locked away to reflect on her disobedience, she'd heard them planning worse, much worse. So she'd run, fled in the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and the will to survive. 5 years of freedom, cold, lonely freedom, was about to end. Lyra slung the pack over her shoulder and moved to the back window. If she left now, used the coming storm as cover. A howl cut through the wind, so close it made her blood freeze in her veins. Not just any howl, an Alpha call, commanding, searching. Too late. Lyra's wolf responded instinctively, a whimper rising in her throat before she could suppress it. 5 years of isolation hadn't erased the primal response to an Alpha's call. She crouched beneath the window, mind racing, the cabin's scent masking charms. Herbs and mixtures she'd learned from an old book might hide her presence from a distance, but up close, any wolf would detect her, especially an Alpha. Another howl, closer still, different from the first. There were at least 2 of them. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Not Marcus, then. Another pack? Territory hunters? Rogues? None of the possibilities offered comfort. A sharp knock at the door made her jump, a small cry escaping her lips before she could stop it. "I know you're in there." A deep voice, unfamiliar but undeniably Alpha, carried through the wooden door. "I'm not here to harm you." Lyra remained silent, her hand creeping toward the knife strapped at her thigh, the only weapon she had. "The storm is getting worse," the voice continued. "I've been tracking unusual activity in these woods for days. I just want to talk." "Go away," Lyra called, hating the tremor in her voice. "This is my territory." A pause, then a low chuckle that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. An unmated Omega claiming territory? That's unusual. Lyra's grip tightened on her knife. "I've survived here for 5 years without a pack. I don't need one now." 5 years, the voice repeated, something like surprise coloring the words. "That's impressive, but you won't survive this storm without more firewood. The one you dropped is getting buried as we speak." Lyra cursed silently. He'd been watching her. "I have a proposition," the Alpha continued. "Let me help you gather wood for the storm. In return, I ask only for shelter until it passes. Then I'll leave, if that's what you want." "And your companion?" Lyra called, remembering the second howl. Another pause. "My second is patrolling the perimeter. He won't approach without my command." Lyra closed her eyes, weighing her options. She could try to run, but with the storm closing in and 2 wolves outside, she wouldn't get far. She could stay barricaded, but as the Alpha had pointed out, her firewood supply was now critically low. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" she demanded. "You don't," came the honest reply. "But I give you my word as Alpha that I mean you no harm. And," his voice lowered slightly, "if I wanted to force entry, that door wouldn't stop me." The truth of his words sent ice through her veins. An Alpha at full strength could easily break down her door, no matter how many locks she'd installed. Lyra took a deep breath, steeling herself. 5 years of isolation had taught her to trust her instincts. And right now, those instincts were telling her that freezing to death was a more immediate threat than the wolf outside her door. "Step back from the door," she called. 10 paces. "And tell your second to stay where he is." She heard movement outside, snow crunching under retreating footsteps. Then the voice again, more distant now. "Done." With trembling fingers, Lyra unlatched the locks and eased the door open, knife still gripped tightly in her hand. The blast of cold air made her gasp, but it was the sight before her that stole her breath entirely. 10 paces back, as promised, stood the Alpha, tall and powerfully built, with dark hair dusted with snowflakes, and eyes the color of amber in firelight. He wore only a light jacket despite the freezing temperature, a display of strength typical of Alphas, but it was his expression that caught her off guard. No malice, no predatory intent, Just open curiosity and something else. Respect? My name is Kieran, he said, offering a slight nod of his head, an alpha acknowledging an equal, not a subordinate. The gesture was so unexpected that Lyra found herself momentarily speechless. Why are you here? She finally managed, knife still raised defensively. Truthfully, Kieran's gaze swept over the small cabin, the meager woodpile, then returned to her face. I didn't believe the reports. An Omega surviving alone in the harshest territory of the Northern Range? It seemed impossible. Well, now you've seen it. Satisfied your curiosity? Lyra couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Kieran's expression softened. Not even close. But right now, that storm is the more pressing concern. He gestured to the darkening sky. Will you accept my help? Lyra looked past him to the forest, then up at the heavy clouds. Already the snowfall was intensifying, the wind picking up strength. Soon it would be a full blizzard. Making her decision, she lowered the knife slightly. Firewood first, then we talk. A smile touched Kieran's lips, transforming his stern features into something almost approachable. Fair enough. As Lyra watched him move toward the woodpile, his powerful frame making easy work of what would have taken her multiple trips, a troubling thought occurred to her. In 5 years, no one had found her. Why now? Why him? And more importantly, would she survive the answers to those questions? The storm descended upon them as they finished bringing in the last of the firewood. Kieran stacked it neatly beside the hearth, his movements efficient and practiced. Lyra kept her distance, knife never far from reach, as she added logs to the fire. The small cabin gradually warmed, the howling wind outside making the flames dance in the fireplace. Thank you, she said stiffly, the words unfamiliar on her tongue after so long without company. For the help. Kieran nodded, settling himself on the floor near the fire, his back against the wall. A respectful distance from her, she noted. You've built a good life here, he observed, his amber eyes taking in the small but well-organized cabin. Most wouldn't have survived a month, let alone 5 years. Lyra didn't respond, unsure if it was a compliment or merely an observation. Instead, she moved to the tiny kitchen area, putting water on to boil. Tea was a luxury she rarely indulged in, saving her precious stores for the coldest nights. But tonight, with a strange alpha in her home and uncertainty hanging in the air, she needed the comfort it provided. You still haven't told me why you're really here, she said, her back to him as she prepared 2 cups. The truth this time. The silence stretched long enough that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. The world beyond these woods is changing, Omega. Pack territories are shifting. Alliances are forming and breaking. And in the midst of it all, rumors began to surface of a lone wolf surviving in the unclaimed forests of the north. Lyra turned, cups in hand, her expression guarded. And you, what? Came to recruit me for your pack? Sorry to disappoint, but I'm not interested. Kieran accepted the offered cup with a nod of thanks. No, at least not at first. Initially, I came to confirm the rumors. His gaze met hers over the rim of his cup. An Omega surviving alone challenges everything we've been taught about pack dynamics. It makes wolves uncomfortable. So I'm a threat to the natural order? Lyra couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped her. Is that why you're here? To eliminate the anomaly? If that were true, Kieran said quietly, we wouldn't be sharing tea. The simple logic of his statement made her pause. He was right. An alpha intent on harm wouldn't have bothered with politeness or assistance. Then what? Kieran sipped his tea, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm here because I need to understand how you've done it, and because I believe you might be the answer to a problem my pack is facing. Outside, the storm raged on, snow piling against the windows, the wind finding every crack and crevice in the cabin's construction. But inside, a different kind of tension built, one made of questions, suspicions, and the undeniable pull Lyra felt toward the alpha sitting across from her, a pull she'd spent 5 years convincing herself she'd never feel again. The storm intensified through the night, transforming the forest into a howling wasteland of white. Lyra sat perched on her small bed, back pressed against the wall, watching Kieran through half-lidded eyes. Despite her exhaustion, she refused to sleep with an alpha under her roof, especially one who claimed to have a proposition for her. Kieran had respected her wariness, making his bed on the floor near the fire without complaint. Now he slept, his breathing deep and even. In repose, his face lost some of its hardness, the perpetual alertness of an alpha temporarily set aside. Lyra found herself studying him. The strong line of his jaw, the dark lashes against his skin, the slight furrow between his brows that remained even in sleep. He didn't look like Marcus. Where her former alpha had been all sharp edges and cold calculation, Kieran seemed warmer somehow, more human, despite the raw power he emanated. Lyra shook her head, dispelling the comparison. Appearances meant nothing. All alphas were the same when it came down to it, driven by power, control, and the unshakable belief in their own superiority. Her hand drifted unconsciously to the scars on her back, fingers tracing the raised lines through her thin shirt. 20 lashes, one for each year of her life at the time. Marcus had called it educational. The memory made her stomach clench. She'd been so young, so naive. Born into the Red Cedar Pack, she'd never known anything but pack life. As an Omega, her role had been clear. Serve, support, nurture. Never question, never challenge. But questions burned inside her like embers, and eventually, they'd flared into open flame. When Marcus had ordered the execution of a packmate for a minor infraction, she'd spoken up. Only once. Only a few words of protest. It had been enough to earn her 20 lashes, and a future she couldn't bear to contemplate. A soft sound pulled her from the bitter memory. Kieran was stirring, his amber eyes blinking open, immediately alert. His gaze found hers across the small cabin. "You didn't sleep," he observed, voice rough with disuse. Lyra shrugged, not bothering to deny it. "I don't sleep well with strangers in my home." Kieran sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Fair enough." He glanced toward the window, where faint gray light was beginning to penetrate the swirling snow. "Storm's still going. It'll last another day at least," Lyra said, sliding off the bed and moving to stoke the fire. "These northern storms don't pass quickly." Kieran watched her work, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You mentioned surviving here for 5 years. Where were you before?" The question, asked casually but laden with implications, made Lyra's shoulders tense. "What makes you think I was anywhere else?" "Most wolves aren't born in isolation," Kieran replied, "and you have the mannerisms of someone who once lived in a pack. The way you prepare tea, how you arrange your living space. Small things, but telling." Lyra kept her back to him, focusing on the fire. "My past isn't relevant to whatever proposition you came here to make, isn't it?" Kieran's voice remained calm, but a new intensity entered it. "You fled from somewhere, Omega. Or should I say, from someone." The kindling snapped in Lyra's hands. She whirled to face him, eyes flashing. "Don't presume to know anything about me or my reasons." Kieran held her gaze, unflinching. "I know the look of someone running from something. I've seen it in enough eyes to recognize it in yours." "And what exactly do you think I'm running from?" Lyra challenged, anger rising like a tide within her chest. "An alpha who abused his power," Kieran said quietly. "The scars on your back tell their own story." Lyra froze, a chill that had nothing to do with the winter cold seeping into her bones. "You saw when you were gathering wood yesterday," Kieran confirmed. "Your coat shifted. I didn't mean to intrude on your privacy, but..." He hesitated. "Those are discipline marks. Old-fashioned and outlawed in most territories now." "Not in all territories," Lyra whispered, her anger giving way to a dull ache. "Not in mine." "Red Cedar Pack," Kieran said, and it wasn't a question. Lyra's head snapped up, eyes wide. "How did you..." "Marcus still leads them. His reputation precedes him, even in territories as distant as mine." Kieran's expression darkened. "He's known for his traditional approach to pack hierarchy, particularly with Omegas." The casual mention of her former alpha's name made Lyra's heart stutter. "You know of him?" "I know of many pack leaders, both those I respect and those I don't." Kieran rose to his feet in a fluid motion, stretching muscles stiff from sleeping on the hard floor. "Marcus falls firmly in the latter category." Lyra watched him warily, processing this information. "You still haven't told me what proposition you came here to make." Kieran met her gaze directly. "My pack needs help, specifically the kind only an Omega can provide." "I'm not interested in joining another pack," Lyra said immediately. "I left that life behind." "I'm not asking you to join permanently," Kieran clarified. "Just to help us through a crisis." Lyra crossed her arms, suspicion clear in her stance. What kind of crisis requires an Omega who's been living alone in the woods for 5 years? Kieran hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. My pack has been fractured. Internal conflicts, power struggles. We've lost too many members to infighting, and now we face external threats as well. The pack bonds are weakening. And you think I can help with that? Lyra couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. I've been without pack bonds for 5 years, which makes what you've accomplished all the more remarkable, Kieran replied. Most Omegas wouldn't survive a year without the support of pack bonds. You've not only survived, but thrived. That kind of strength, that resilience, it's exactly what my pack needs right now. Lyra shook her head, moving to the small kitchen area to prepare a simple breakfast. You're wasting your time, Alpha. I have no interest in pack politics or power struggles, even if it means protecting others like yourself, Kieran asked quietly. Omegas who have suffered under outdated traditions and cruel leadership? Lyra's hand stilled over the pot of oats she was preparing. Explain. My territory borders 3 others, including a small section that touches Red Cedar Land, Kieran said, his voice measured. In recent months, we've had refugees seeking sanctuary, mostly Omegas, fleeing Marcus's increasingly harsh rule. A cold feeling settled in Lyra's stomach. How many? 17 so far. The most recent arrived just 2 weeks ago, a young female no more than 18. She bears similar marks to yours, though fresher. Lyra closed her eyes, memories of her own escape washing over her. The fear, the desperation, the bone-deep certainty that being alone in the wilderness was safer than remaining in the pack. What does this have to do with me? She asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. The refugees are struggling to integrate, Kieran explained. Years of abuse have left them wary, distrustful. They form no bonds, share no strength with the pack, and without those bonds they remain vulnerable to outside threats and to their own trauma. And you think I can help them? What? Adjust to their new life? Become good little pack members again? The bitterness in Lyra's voice was unmistakable. I think you can show them it's possible to heal, Kieran said simply, to find strength in their own nature as you have, and perhaps, if they choose it, to form new bonds based on respect rather than fear. Lyra turned to face him, studying his expression for any sign of deception. Why do you care what happens to Omegas from another pack? Most Alphas would turn them away or use them as bargaining chips. Something flashed in Kieran's eyes, a darkness, quickly suppressed. Let's just say I have my reasons for opposing Marcus's methods. Personal reasons? Lyra pressed, sensing there was more to his story than he was revealing. Kieran's jaw tightened. Yes. Silence fell between them, broken only by the howling wind outside and the soft bubbling of the oats cooking over the fire. Lyra's mind raced, weighing his words, searching for the trap, the angle, the hidden motivation. Even if I wanted to help, she finally said, I can't leave. Not in winter. The storm will pass, Kieran countered. And my territory is only 3 days' journey from here, with proper supplies and companionship. Why me? Lyra demanded. There must be other Omegas, ones already integrated into packs, who could help. None who understand what these refugees have endured, Kieran said. None who have found a way to survive and thrive outside the traditional pack structure. You're unique, Lyra. The use of her name, the first time he'd spoken it, sent an unexpected shiver through her. It had been so long since anyone had called her by name. I need time to think, she said, turning back to the cooking pot. Of course. Kieran nodded, respecting her need for space. The storm gives us at least another day. They ate breakfast in silence, the weight of Kieran's proposition hanging between them. Lyra's mind churned with conflicting emotions, fear, doubt, and beneath it all, a tiny spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. After they'd eaten, Kieran moved to the window, gazing out at the raging storm. Your cabin is well built, he observed, especially for someone working alone. I had no choice but to learn, Lyra replied, collecting their bowls. It was this, or die. Kieran turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. You've built a life here. I understand why you're reluctant to leave it, even temporarily. It's not just that, Lyra admitted, surprising herself with her candor. I don't know if I can be what those refugees need. I've been alone so long. I've forgotten how to connect. I think you remember more than you realize, Kieran said softly. The fact that you care enough to worry about helping them suggests as much. Lyra glanced away, uncomfortable with his perception. Tell me about your pack, she said, changing the subject. If I were to consider this proposition, I'd need to know what I'd be walking into. Kieran seemed to recognize the deflection, but accepted it without comment. The Silver Moon Pack has held territory in the eastern forests for over 100 years. We're smaller than some, about 80 members currently. I've been alpha for 6 years. Young for an alpha, Lyra noted, genuine curiosity overtaking her wariness for a moment. It wasn't my choice, Kieran replied, a shadow passing over his features. My father was killed in a territory dispute. The mantle passed to me earlier than anyone expected. I'm sorry, Lyra said, the words feeling inadequate but sincere. Kieran acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. It was a difficult transition. The pack was divided on whether I was ready to lead. Some thought my younger brother would be a better choice, despite tradition. Is that the source of the fractures you mentioned? Partly, Kieran admitted. But the deeper issues emerged later, when Marcus began expanding his influence. Some in my pack favored aligning with him for protection. Others, including myself, opposed any alliance with his methods. Lyra's brow furrowed. Marcus is extending his reach? Beyond Red Cedar territory? He's forming what he calls a coalition of traditional packs. Kieran's lip curled slightly at the words. In practice, it means absorbing smaller packs through intimidation and eliminating any who oppose his vision of werewolf society. A chill ran down Lyra's spine. And your pack is in his path. We're too large to simply absorb, but too small to withstand a coordinated attack from multiple packs, Kieran confirmed. Our best defense is unity, strong pack bonds that allow us to fight as one. But with the internal divisions, those bonds are weakening. And the refugees from his pack are making those divisions worse, Lyra guessed. Because they refuse to bond with anyone. Kieran nodded. They're seen as a liability by some of my pack members. I won't turn them away, but I need to find a way to help them integrate, for their sake and for the pack's. Lyra moved to the fire, adding another log as she considered his words. The picture he painted was disturbing on multiple levels. Marcus expanding his influence, spreading his cruel methods to other packs. Refugees fleeing, only to find themselves unwelcome in their place of sanctuary. And Kieran, caught between his principles and the survival of his pack. If what you say is true, she said slowly, then Marcus won't stop at your territory. Eventually, he'll expand in all directions. Including north, Kieran agreed, his amber eyes intent on her face. Your isolation won't protect you forever, Lyra. The truth of his words settled like a stone in her stomach. She'd fled to these woods believing them too remote, too harsh for any pack to claim. But if Marcus was ambitious enough, determined enough, I need to show you something, Kieran said suddenly, crossing to where his jacket hung by the door. He reached into an inner pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and creased from frequent handling. He held it out to her, and after a moment's hesitation, Lyra took it. Carefully unfolding it, she found herself looking at a hand-drawn map, the territories of various packs marked and labeled. This was made 3 years ago, Kieran explained, moving to stand beside her. His finger traced a boundary line. This was Red Cedar territory then. Lyra nodded, recognizing the familiar outline. And this, Kieran continued, his finger moving to encompass a much larger area, is their territory now. They've absorbed the Blackwater Pack to the south and the River Valley Pack to the east. Lyra stared at the map, a creeping sense of dread building within her. How? Those were established packs, with strong alphas. Blackwater's alpha was found dead, an apparent hunting accident. His successor agreed to a merger with Red Cedar within a month. Kieran's voice was grim. River Valley held out longer, but a mysterious illness swept through their ranks last winter. By spring, they were too weakened to resist when Marcus offered protection. The implications were clear and horrifying. You think he had them killed, orchestrated the illness. I can't prove it, Kieran admitted, but the pattern is too convenient to be coincidence. Lyra sank onto the edge of her bed, the map still clutched in her hands. And now he's setting his sights on your territory. Yes. Kieran's answer was simple, direct. The Silver Moon Pack stands directly in his path of expansion. And after us, his gaze met hers, heavy with meaning. The northern forests, Lyra whispered, her sanctuary, her home. Outside, the storm continued to rage, a fitting backdrop to the turmoil in Lyra's mind. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, was threatened by the very alpha she'd fled 5 years ago. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. "I won't lie to you, Lyra," Kieran said quietly. "My pack needs your help, but you need us too. Alone, neither of us can stand against what's coming." Lyra looked up at him, searching his amber eyes for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was a trick to lure her back into pack life against her will. She found only sincerity, determination, and something else, a weariness that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy responsibilities. "If I agree to help," she said slowly, "I set the terms. I maintain my independence. And when it's done, I decide where I go next." Kieran held her gaze. "Agreed. I want your word as alpha," Lyra pressed. "No manipulation. No pressure to stay beyond what's necessary." "You have it," Kieran said without hesitation. "My word as alpha that you will remain free to choose your own path." The solemnity of his promise hung in the air between them. An alpha's word was binding, one of the few pack traditions Lyra still respected. She took a deep breath, feeling as if she stood on the edge of a precipice. 5 years of carefully constructed isolation, of hard-won peace, hung in the balance. But so did the lives of 17 refugees who had suffered as she had. So did the future of the northern forests she called home. "When the storm passes," she said finally, "we'll go." Relief flashed across Kieran's features, quickly replaced by respect. He offered a slight bow of his head. Again, that gesture of equality that so surprised her. "Thank you," he said simply. Lyra folded the map and handed it back to him. Her decision made, but her heart far from settled. "Don't thank me yet, Alpha. I haven't helped anyone." "But you've agreed to try," Kieran replied. "Sometimes that's the hardest part." As if in response, the wind outside diminished slightly, the howling reduced to a mournful moan. The storm was beginning to weaken. Soon, they would leave the safety of her cabin for the uncertainty of pack territories and ancient conflicts. Lyra moved to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass. 5 years of solitude stretched behind her. Ahead lay a path she'd never expected to walk again, but perhaps Kieran was right. Perhaps the hardest part was simply agreeing to try. The storm broke at dawn on the 3rd day, leaving behind a transformed landscape of pristine white. Lyra stood outside her cabin, breathing in the sharp, clean air as she surveyed what she was about to leave behind. The small garden plot now buried under snow. The woodshed she'd built with her own hands. The worn path to the stream where she gathered water. 5 years of solitary existence, condensed into a single backward glance. "We should reach the border of my territory by nightfall tomorrow if we maintain a good pace," Kieran said, adjusting the pack on his shoulders. He'd insisted on carrying the heavier load, though Lyra had argued against it. "I'm not some fragile flower," she'd snapped when he'd tried to take her pack. "I've survived worse than a 2-day journey." Kieran had simply raised an eyebrow. "I never suggested you were fragile, but my stamina is greater, and that's simple biology, not a judgment on your capabilities." Now, as they set off through the snow-laden forest, Lyra found herself grateful for his foresight. The snow reached mid-thigh in places, making each step an exhausting effort. Kieran broke trail, his larger frame and alpha strength carving a path she could follow. They traveled in silence for the first few hours, the only sounds their labored breathing and the crunch of snow beneath their boots. Occasionally Kieran would pause, scenting the air, ensuring they were alone in the vast wilderness. By midday, they'd covered less ground than planned, the deep snow slowing their progress considerably. They stopped in a small clearing to rest, Kieran producing dried meat and hard bread from his pack. "Your second," Lyra said as they ate, breaking the long silence. "Won't he be concerned that you haven't returned?" "Eli knows where I am," Kieran replied, brushing snow from his sleeve. "He returned to the pack yesterday to report our location, and that we'd wait out the storm." Lyra frowned. "I didn't see him leave. He left while you were gathering herbs from your garden," Kieran explained. "I didn't mention it because you were already on edge with one wolf in your territory. I didn't want to add to your stress." The consideration behind the gesture took Lyra by surprise. Most alphas wouldn't concern themselves with an omega's comfort or stress levels. "How did you become alpha?" she asked suddenly, the question emerging before she could consider it. Kieran looked up, clearly surprised by the change in topic. "I told you, my father died. I know that part," Lyra interrupted. "But you said it wasn't your choice, that some thought your brother would be better suited. Yet here you are." She studied his face, seeking clues to the man beneath the alpha persona. Most wolves who ascend reluctantly don't hold power for long. Kieran was quiet for a moment, his amber eyes distant with memory. "My father was a good alpha, but a terrible father," he finally said. "He believed in the old ways. That strength was all that mattered, that compassion was weakness. He was especially hard on my brother, Nate, the potential challenger to your leadership." "Nate never wanted to be alpha," Kieran corrected her. "He challenged me because he thought I'd rule as our father had, that I'd continue the cycle." A faint smile touched his lips. He was quite surprised when I yielded to his challenge. Lyra blinked in confusion. "You yielded? But you're the alpha." "I yielded the fight, not the position," Kieran clarified. "I refused to hurt my brother to prove I was worthy to lead. It went against everything our father had taught us, which was exactly the point." His expression sobered. When Nate realized I intended to lead differently than our father, he withdrew his challenge. The story didn't align with anything Lyra had been taught about alpha succession. In her experience, challenges were brutal, often deadly affairs, displays of dominance that reinforced the pack hierarchy. "Your pack accepted this?" she asked skeptically. "Not all of them at first," Kieran admitted. "Some saw it as weakness, others as wisdom. Over time, most came to appreciate a leadership style, based on more than just physical dominance." He met her gaze directly. "The fractures I mentioned began when Marcus's influence started spreading. Some in my pack believe my methods leave us vulnerable." "And do they?" Lyra couldn't help asking. Kieran's jaw tightened. "Compassion isn't weakness, but in a world where others mistake it for such, we must be vigilant." They finished their meal in thoughtful silence, then continued their journey. As the day wore on, Lyra found herself stealing glances at the alpha who broke trail before her. Everything about him contradicted what she'd been taught to expect from his kind. Where Marcus had ruled through fear and dominance, Kieran seemed to value respect and understanding. It was unsettling. 5 years of solid beliefs about alphas, about pack dynamics, were being challenged with every conversation, every considerate action. By evening, they'd made good progress despite the difficult conditions. Kieran found a sheltered spot beneath a rocky overhang, protected from the wind and any renewed snowfall. "We'll camp here," he decided, dropping his pack. "It's not ideal, but it's the best shelter we'll find before nightfall." Lyra set about gathering what dry wood she could find, while Kieran cleared snow from the ground. Working together without discussion, they soon had a small fire crackling in the gathering darkness. As they sat beside the flames, the forest growing quiet around them, Lyra felt the weight of questions unasked. There was so much she still didn't understand about this alpha who had disrupted her solitary existence. "Earlier, you said you had personal reasons for opposing Marcus," she ventured, warming her hands over the fire. "What did you mean?" Kieran's expression darkened, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. For a moment, Lyra thought he wouldn't answer. "My mother was from the Red Cedar Pack," he finally said, his voice low. "She fled when she was young, before Marcus became alpha. She never spoke much about her time there, but she carried scars similar to yours." Understanding dawned on Lyra. She was an Omega. Kieran nodded. One who escaped a pack that saw her designation as license for abuse. His hands clenched into fists. "My father took her in, protected her. It was the one truly good thing he ever did. When she died, he reverted to his old ways, became harder, crueler." "I'm sorry," Lyra said softly, the words inadequate but sincere. "When refugees from Red Cedar began arriving at our borders, I couldn't turn them away," Kieran continued. "Not when I knew what they were fleeing. Not when I'd seen the same haunted look in my mother's eyes." The revelation shifted something in Lyra's perception of him. His concern for the refugees wasn't just strategic or moral. It was personal, born from his own history, his own loss. "Did Marcus ever try to reclaim her?" Lyra asked, knowing the possessiveness of alphas like him. "No, she left before his time. But the pack culture she escaped, the one that treated Omegas as property rather than people, that's the legacy he's continuing, expanding." Kieran's gaze shifted from the fire to her face. "The legacy you escaped." Lyra nodded, memories she'd tried to bury rising unbidden, the daily humiliations, the expectation of servitude, the casual cruelty justified as natural order. "After I escaped, I swore I'd never let another wolf have power over me again," she admitted. "Even in the dead of winter when the loneliness felt like it would crush me, I reminded myself that freedom was worth the price. It is, Kieran agreed. But freedom doesn't have to mean isolation, Lyra. There are pacts that honor individual choice while still providing the strength of community. Like yours? She asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. We try, Kieran said simply. We don't always succeed, but we try. The honesty in his admission was disarming. No grand promises, no idealistic claims, just a simple acknowledgement of effort and imperfection. They fell silent, the fire crackling between them as stars emerged in the clear night sky. Tomorrow they would reach the borders of Kieran's territory, and Lyra would face her first test, encountering another wolf besides Kieran. The thought made her stomach tighten with anxiety. You should rest, Kieran said, noting her tense posture. I'll take first watch. Lyra hesitated, old fears warring with newfound trust. Wake me in 4 hours, she finally said. You need rest too. Kieran looked surprised by her concern, but nodded in agreement. Lyra settled into her bedroll, back against the rock wall, still able to observe Kieran's silhouette against the firelight. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to their conversations, to the revelations about Kieran's past, to the uncertain future awaiting her in his territory. You're still awake, Kieran observed softly, not turning from his vigilant watch of the forest. How did you know? You're breathing, he replied. It changes when you sleep. The casual admission that he'd observed her sleeping patterns so closely should have disturbed her. Instead, she found it oddly comforting, a reminder of his attentiveness, his awareness. I keep thinking about the refugees, Lyra admitted. What they've been through, what they need. She stared up at the stars visible beyond the overhang. I'm not sure I'm the right person to help them. I haven't exactly mastered healing from my own past. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. Maybe that's exactly why you're the right person, he finally said. You understand the journey they're on because you're still on it yourself. His words settled over her like a warm blanket, unexpectedly reassuring. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps her unfinished healing, her ongoing struggle, was precisely what these refugees needed to see. Proof that the path forward was possible, if not perfect. Get some sleep, Lyra, Kieran said gently. Tomorrow will be challenging enough. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythmic sounds of the forest and Kieran's steady presence lull her toward sleep. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't alone in the wilderness. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something like hope flickering in her chest. A dangerous feeling, perhaps. But as sleep finally claimed her, Lyra couldn't bring herself to extinguish it. They reached the border of Kieran's territory by mid-afternoon the following day. Lyra sensed the boundary before she saw any physical marker. A subtle shift in the air, the forest taking on an occupied feeling after miles of wilderness. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, instinctively recognizing she was entering another pack's domain. We're here, Kieran confirmed, pausing at the crest of a small ridge. Below them stretched a valley, protected by mountains on 3 sides and thick forest on the 4th. A river cut through its center, the water dark against the snow-covered banks. Near the river stood a collection of cabins, smoke rising from chimneys, evidence of the pack that called this place home. Lyra stopped beside Kieran, her heart hammering against her ribs. After 5 years of solitude, the sight of so much life, so many wolves, sent anxiety crawling up her spine. Second thoughts? Kieran asked quietly, noting her hesitation. About 100 of them, Lyra admitted, trying for humor though her voice trembled slightly. Kieran surprised her by placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The weight of it was grounding, his touch warm even through her thick coat. You don't have to stay if it becomes too much, he reminded her. Our agreement stands. Lyra nodded, drawing a deep breath to steady herself. Let's get this over with. They hadn't gone more than 50 yards past the border when Lyra sensed movement in the trees ahead. 3 wolves emerged from the forest, shifting smoothly from wolf to human form as they approached. 2 males and a female, all bearing the alert, watchful demeanor of border guards. Alpha, the lead male said, offering a respectful nod to Kieran, before his curious gaze shifted to Lyra. You found her. I did, Kieran confirmed. Lyra, this is Eli, my second. And these are Mara and Damon, part of our border patrol. Lyra fought the urge to step behind Kieran, to hide from their scrutiny. Instead, she forced herself to meet their gazes, chin lifted slightly in defiance of her own fear. "The Omega from the north," Eli observed, his expression unreadable. "Your reputation precedes you." "Does it?" Lyra couldn't keep the edge from her voice. 5 years alone in the harshest territory of the northern range? Eli's eyebrow arched. "Yes, that earns a reputation. Especially among those who understand how difficult it would be." There was respect in his tone, not condescension. It caught Lyra off guard. "The council is waiting," Mara interjected, her gaze moving between Lyra and Kieran with undisguised curiosity. "They've been in session since word came that you were returning with her." Kieran nodded, not seeming surprised by this news. "We'll head there directly. Eli, walk with us. I need an update on what's happened in my absence." As they descended into the valley, Eli briefed Kieran on pack matters, border disputes with neighboring territories, concerns about food stores for the remainder of winter, minor squabbles among pack members. Lyra listened with half an ear, most of her attention consumed by the sights, sounds, and scents of pack life surrounding her. It was overwhelming after so long alone. Children's laughter drifted from between cabins. Wolves in both human and wolf form moved about daily tasks. The smells of cooking fires, fresh meat, and multiple wolf scents mingled in the crisp air. But beneath the ordinary rhythms of pack life, Lyra sensed tension. Wolves stopped to stare as they passed. Conversations hushed. She caught snippets of whispered comments. The lone Omega, Alpha, brought her himself. Think she can help the refugees. Waste of time. Kieran must have noticed her discomfort, because he shifted closer, his presence a buffer between her and the curious stares of his pack. "The council house is just ahead," he told her, gesturing toward a larger structure near the center of the settlement. "The council consists of 5 members, elected by the pack. They advise me on important decisions." "Democratic," Lyra observed, surprised. Most packs she knew operated under more authoritarian structures, with the Alpha's word being absolute. "My innovation," Kieran admitted. "Not universally popular, but effective." The council house was warm and well lit, with a large central hearth and a circular table surrounded by carved wooden chairs. 4 wolves were already seated, 2 male, 2 female, all appearing to be in their 40s or 50s. They rose as Kieran entered, offering respectful nods to their Alpha. "Counselors," Kieran greeted them. "Thank you for your patience during my absence. I'd like to introduce Lyra, who has agreed to help us with our refugee situation." Lyra felt their assessing gazes, their subtle inhalations as they caught her scent. After years without pack contact, the scrutiny made her skin crawl, but she held her ground, returning their stares with a steady gaze of her own. "Welcome to Silver Moon territory," said one of the women, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. "I'm Helena, head of the council." The others introduced themselves in turn. Victor, a burly male with a gruff demeanor, Sophia, a slender female with kind eyes, and Marcus, a lean male whose name made Lyra flinch involuntarily. "Different Marcus," Kieran murmured for her ears only, catching her reaction. "We've heard much about you," Helena continued, gesturing for them to sit. "The Omega who survived alone in the north. It's quite remarkable." "I did what was necessary to survive," Lyra replied simply, taking the offered seat. "And now you've agreed to help our refugees," Victor said, his tone making it clear he harbored doubts. "What exactly do you think you can offer them that we cannot?" The challenge was direct, bordering on rude. Lyra felt Kieran tense beside her, but she placed a subtle hand on his arm, a silent request to let her handle this. "Understanding," she said, meeting Victor's skeptical gaze. "I know what it means to flee abuse, to fear trust, to believe that isolation is safer than connection." She glanced around the table. "Do any of you share that experience?" Silence answered her question, as she'd expected. "That's what I can offer," Lyra continued. "A perspective you don't have, a path they might actually be willing to follow because I've walked it myself." Victor looked ready to object further, but Helena raised a hand, silencing him. "How do you propose to help them integrate with our pack when they've resisted all previous efforts?" It was a fair question, and one Lyra had pondered during their journey. "I don't," she said frankly. "At least not at first. Integration shouldn't be the goal. Healing should be. Once they begin to heal, connections will form naturally. And if they choose not to connect with our pack?" Marcus asked. "If they remain isolated, consuming resources without contributing, Then that's their choice, Lyra replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Forced bonds aren't real bonds. They're just another form of cage. A tense silence followed her words. Lyra could sense the council's discomfort with her philosophy, so different from traditional pack thinking, where the collective always took precedence over individual choice. How long do you envision this process taking? Sophia asked, breaking the silence. Her tone was genuinely curious, without the skepticism of her peers. I don't know, Lyra admitted. Healing isn't linear. It doesn't follow a schedule. Some might make progress quickly. Others might take months or years. We may not have months, Victor interjected grimly. Marcus, the other Marcus, has been moving his forces closer to our borders. We've had 3 incursions in the past month alone. Kieran leaned forward. All the more reason why we need these refugees to find their strength and their place among us. Divided, we're vulnerable. United, we stand a chance. Helena studied Lyra thoughtfully. You understand that if you fail, the consequences could be dire, not just for our pack, but for the refugees themselves. The weight of responsibility settled on Lyra's shoulders, heavy and uncomfortable. 5 years ago, she'd fled rather than face the consequences of speaking out. Now she was willingly stepping into a role where her actions, or inactions, could affect dozens of lives. I understand, she said quietly. I can't promise success, but I can promise to try. Helena exchanged glances with the other council members, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, she nodded. Very well. We'll provide whatever resources you need. But, she added, her expression hardening slightly, we expect regular updates on your progress. Agreed, Kieran said, before Lyra could respond. Now, if the council has no further questions, Lyra has traveled far and needs rest before meeting the refugees. No one objected, though Victor's expression made it clear he had more to say. As they left the council house, Lyra felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. That went better than expected, Kieran commented as they walked through the settlement. Did it? Lyra asked dryly. Your council thinks I'm going to fail spectacularly and doom you all in the process. They're cautious, Kieran corrected. With good reason. But they didn't outright reject the idea. Lyra glanced at him. Does their opinion matter? You're the alpha. I could override them if necessary, Kieran acknowledged. But that's not how I choose to lead. Consensus builds stronger foundations than commands. Another departure from the leadership style Lyra had grown up with. In the Red Cedar Pack, the alpha's word was law, unquestionable and absolute. They approached a small cabin set slightly apart from the others, near the edge of the forest. Smoke curled from its chimney, suggesting it was already prepared for occupation. This will be your quarters while you're with us, Kieran explained, opening the door. I thought you might prefer some privacy, given your years of solitude. Lyra stepped inside, surprised by the thoughtfulness of the arrangement. The cabin was simple but comfortable. A bed with fresh linens, a small table and chairs, a hearth with a cheerful fire, and basic provisions stocked on shelves. It's not as isolated as your northern cabin, Kieran continued, but it offers more separation than our communal dwellings. Thank you, Lyra said, genuinely touched by his consideration. This will be easier. Kieran nodded, understanding in his eyes. Rest tonight. Tomorrow I'll introduce you to the refugees. He turned to leave, but Lyra called after him. Kieran? His name felt strange on her tongue, the first time she'd used it instead of his title. The council mentioned incursions. How serious is the threat? Kieran's expression sobered. Serious enough. Marcus has been testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses. So far they've been minor skirmishes, but they're increasing in frequency. And the refugees? Are they the weakness he's exploiting? Not directly, Kieran said, but their presence has created division within the pack. Division creates vulnerability. He hesitated, then added, Some believe we should return them to Red Cedar territory, to appease Marcus. Horror washed over Lyra. That would be a death sentence. I know, Kieran replied grimly, which is why it will never happen under my leadership. But you understand now why your mission here is so crucial. The responsibility pressed down on her again, heavier than before. I'll do what I can, she promised. Kieran studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Get some rest, Lyra. Tomorrow will be challenging enough. After he left, Lyra moved around the small cabin, familiarizing herself with its layout. assessing it as shelter in the way years of solitary survival had taught her. The walls were solid, the roof well-maintained, the hearth drew properly, without smoking. The windows were covered with oiled paper that let in light while keeping out drafts. It was more comfort than she'd known in years. Yet as night fell and the sounds of pack life continued outside, muted conversations, occasional laughter, the pad of paws on snow, Lyra felt a strange hollowness in her chest. 5 years she'd spent alone, convincing herself she needed no one, that solitude was preferable to the risks of connection. Now, surrounded by more wolves than she'd seen since her escape, she found herself yearning for something she couldn't quite name. A soft knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Warily, Lyra opened it to find a young female wolf standing outside, a covered basket in her hands. "Alpha Kieran asked me to bring you some dinner," the girl explained, offering the basket. "I'm Lily." Lyra accepted the basket with a murmured thanks, noticing the faint scars visible on the girl's wrists as her sleeves rode up. Recognition dawned. "You're one of the refugees." Lily nodded, her eyes downcast. "The first to arrive, almost a year ago. From Red Cedar Pack?" Lyra asked gently. "Yes." Lily's voice was barely audible. "Alpha Kieran said you escaped them too." "I did," Lyra confirmed. 5 years ago." Lily's gaze lifted, meeting Lyra's for the first time. In her eyes, Lyra saw a wary hope. "And you've been okay? On your own?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Lyra understood what Lily was really asking. Is there life after abuse? Is there freedom beyond fear? "It hasn't been easy," Lyra said honestly. "But yes, I've been okay. Better than okay in some ways." Lily nodded, absorbing this. "The others don't believe it's possible," she said after a moment. "To heal, to trust again." She hesitated, then added in a rush, "I want to believe it is." Something fierce and protective rose in Lyra's chest, a feeling she'd thought long extinguished. "It is possible," she said, her voice stronger than before. "Difficult, painful, but possible." Lily's expression flickered with something like hope. "Some of us are gathering tonight, in the old storage cabin by the river. If you wanted to come—" She trailed off, uncertainty clear in her posture. Lyra had planned to rest, to prepare herself for the formal introduction tomorrow. But the tentative invitation, the fragile hope in Lily's eyes, these were more important than rest. "I'd like that," she said. "If you're sure the others won't mind." "They'll mind," Lily said frankly. "But they need to meet you anyway." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Sometimes what we mind is exactly what we need." As Lily turned to leave, Lyra caught the scent of another wolf approaching. Kieran. He appeared from between the cabins, his expression shifting from concern to relief when he spotted Lily. "I see you two have met," he observed, coming to stand beside them. "Lily was kind enough to bring me dinner," Lyra explained. "And to invite her to our gathering tonight," Lily added, a hint of defiance in her tone as she addressed the Alpha directly. Kieran raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment on the invitation. Instead, he asked, "Have you seen Nate today? He was supposed to meet me an hour ago." "Your brother?" Lily clarified. When Kieran nodded, she shook her head. "Not since this morning. He was heading out on patrol with Damon." A flicker of concern crossed Kieran's features. "They should have returned by now." "Maybe they extended the patrol," Lily suggested. "The southern border has had those strange scents lately." "Perhaps," Kieran agreed, though he didn't sound convinced. "If you see him, tell him I'm looking for him." Lily nodded and departed with a last glance at Lyra, a silent confirmation of their plans for later. "Is everything all right?" Lyra asked once Lily was out of earshot. Kieran's brow furrowed. "Probably. Nate's not usually one to miss a meeting without sending word." He shook his head as if to dispel his concern. "I'll find him later. More importantly, how are you settling in?" "As well as can be expected," Lyra replied honestly. "It's overwhelming. After so long alone." Kieran nodded in understanding. "It will take time to adjust. Don't push yourself too hard too quickly. Says the Alpha who's thrown me directly into pack politics and a refugee crisis," Lyra pointed out with a hint of wry humor. A smile tugged at Kieran's lips. "Fair point. But I wouldn't have brought you here if I didn't believe you were strong enough to handle it." The simple expression of confidence warmed something inside Lyra, a feeling both foreign and familiar. How long had it been since anyone had believed in her strength, rather than seeing only her Omega designation and its presumed limitations? "Get some rest," Kieran advised, unaware of the impact his words had made. Tomorrow will be challenging enough, Lyra finished for him, her lips quirking. You say that a lot. Kieran's smile widened into something genuine. Do I? I suppose it's become a habit. Leading a pack often feels like a series of challenges, one after another. Does it ever get easier? Lyra found herself asking. No, Kieran admitted, but you get stronger. His amber eyes held hers for a moment, conveying a deeper meaning beyond the simple words. Then he nodded a farewell and turned to leave. Lyra watched him go, struck by the realization that in just a few days, this alpha had begun to shift her perception of what leadership could be, what strength could look like. It was unsettling, this recalibration of beliefs she'd held firm for 5 years. As darkness fell completely over the Silver Moon territory, Lyra prepared to join Lily and the other refugees, her stomach twisted with nervous anticipation. These wolves had suffered as she had, fled as she had, but where she had chosen isolation, they had sought sanctuary in a pack. Different paths, same starting point. What could she possibly teach them that they hadn't already learned through their own experiences? She didn't have the answer, but as she stepped out into the cold night air, moving toward the distant lights of the gathering place, Lyra recognized that perhaps finding the answer together was the point. Perhaps healing wasn't a solitary journey after all. And perhaps, after 5 years of convincing herself she needed no one, it was time to consider another possibility. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.